Remember the Apollo 1 that go to space in 1967. It has gone forever. No more crews. Nothing. And today we will dive in the large story of them. There is a lot of page that we need to read, and this is part 1. So grab your popcorn, grab your snacks or anything. Get your pillow and ready for the story to begin. Apollo 1. Italy decided AS-204 was planned to be the first crew mission of the Apollo program. The American undertaking to land the first man on the moon. It was planned to launch on February 21, 1967 as the first low Earth orbital test of the Apollo Command and Service Module. However, the mission never flew. A cabin fire during a launch rehearsal test at Cape Kennedy Air Force Station Launch Complex on January 27, 1967 killed all 3 crew members. Command pilot Gus Grissom, senior pilot Ed White, and pilot Roger B. Chaffee, and destroyed the command model. The name Apollo 1, chosen by the crew, was made official by NASA in their honor after the fire. The sparkling under someone's sparks and fire radiations. Ed White tries to open the door, but the door is security. It's locked, and them burned alive. So 6 months later, only a few seconds, they died. Not money, nothing, but died. The name Apollo 1, okay, great. Immediately after the fire, NASA convinced an accident review board to determine the cause of the fire, and both chambers of the United States Congress conducted their own committee injured to oversee NASA's investigation. The ignition source of the fire was determined to be electrical, and fire spread rapidly to combustible nylon materials and the high-pressure oxygen cabin atmosphere. Rescue was prevented by the plugged door hatch, which could not be opened against the internal pressure of the cabin. Because the rocket was unfueled, the test has not been censored. The hazardous, the emergency preparations for it was poor. During the congressional investigation, Senator Walter Mondale publicly revealed a NASA internal document citing problems with Prime Apollo contraction North America invasion, which became known as Phillips Reports. This disclosure embarrassed NASA's emissary, James E. Webb, who was unaware of the document's existence and attracted confusion to the Apollo program. Despite congressional displeasure at NASA's lack of openness, both congressional committees ruled that the issues raised into the report has no bearing on the accident. Crew Apollo flights were suspended for 20 months while the command model hazards were addressed. However, the development and crew testing of the lunar model or LM and Saturn V rocket continued. The Saturn IB launch vehicles for Apollo 1 AS-204 was used for the first LM test flight. Apollo 5, the first successful crew Apollo mission, was flown by Apollo 1's backup crew, Apollo 7, in October 1968. Crews: Edith, Precision astronaut. Command pilot: Gus Grissom. Would have been third space flight. Senior pilot: Darth H. White II. Would have been second space flight. Pilot: Roger B. Chaffee. Would have been first space flight. First backup crew: April-December 1966. Position: Command pilot, astronaut James A. McDivitt. Senior pilot, David R. Scott. Pilot: Rachel L. Rusty Shilorikis. I don't know what, but okay. This crew flew on Apollo 9, right? Yes. Second backup crew: December 1966 to January 1967. Position: astronaut. Command pilot: Walter Mary Schicard Jr. Senior pilot: Don Fulton Isle. Pilot: Rodney Walter Cunningham. This crew flew on Apollo 7. Apollo crew test flight plans. AS-204 was to be the first crew test flight of the Apollo command on a Saturn IB rocket. AS-20B was the test launch operation, ground tracking and control facility, and the performance of the Apollo Saturn launch assembly would have lasted up to 2 weeks. This depending on how the spacecrafts perform. Official portrait of Prime. Here, official portrait of Prime and backup crews for AS-204 as a April 1, 1966. The backup crew standing of McDivitt Center, Scott left and Sirvardike Cart were replaced by Shikara Ellis and Shakana in December 1966. The CSM for the flight number 012, built by North American Aviation NAA, was a Block 1 version designed before the lunar orbit rendezvous. Landing strategy was chosen. Therefore, it lacked the capability of docking with the lunar model. This was incorporated into the Block 2 CSM design along with lessons learned in Block 1. Block 2 would be test flown with the LM when the latter was ready. Director of Flight Crew Operation, Decade Slayton. Select the first Apollo crew in January 1966 with Grissom as command pilot, White as senior pilot, and rookie Don F. Ashley as pilot. Asil dislocated his shoulder twice aboard the KC-135 weightlessness training aircraft and had to undergo surgery on January 27th. Slayton replaced with his Chevy, and NASA announced the crew selection on March 21, 1966. James McDavid, David Scott, and Russell Swick-Schucker were named as the backup crew. On September 29th, Walter Shihoka Els and Walter Cunningham were named as the prime crew for a second Block 1 CSM flight AS-205. NASA planned to follow this with an uncrewed test flight of a LM AS-206. Then the third crew mission would be a dual flight designed AS-278 is which AS-207 will launch the first crew Block 2 CSM which would be ready versus and dock with the LM launch uncrewed on AS-208 in March. NASA has studied the possibility of flying the first Apollo mission as a joint space rendezvous with the final Project Gemini mission, Gemini 12, in November 1966, but by May, delays in making Apollo ready for flight just by itself and the extra time needed to incorporate capability with the Gemini that impractical, this became moot when slippage in readiness of the AS-204 spacecraft causes the last quarter 1966 target date be missed, and the mission was recorded for February 21, 1967. Okay. Mission background. In October 1966, NASA announced the flight would carry a small television camera to broadcast live from the command module. The camera would also be used to allow flight controllers to monitor the spacecraft's instrument panel in flight. Television cameras were carried aboard all crews' Apollo missions. Insignia Grissom crew received approval in June 1966 to design a mission patch with the name Apollo 1. The design center depicts a command and service model flying over the southern United States with Florida. Okay, but where's the thing? Where's this thing end? Where's this thing end? I don't want to read that. Okay, prominent the moon is seen in the distance, symbolic the invention program goal. A yellow border carries the mission and astronauts' names, with other boards set with stars and stripes trimmed in gold. And insignia was designed by the crew, with the artwork done by North America Invasion employee Alan Stevens. Okay, next. Spacecraft and crew preparation. The Apollo Command with and Service Module was much bigger and far more complex than any previous crew spacecraft. In October 1963, Joseph F. Chia was named Apollo Spacecraft Program Office Manager, responsible for managing the designs and constructions of both the CSM and the LM in a spacecraft review meeting held with Chia on August 19, 1966. The crew expressed concern about the amount of flammable materials in the cabin, which both astronauts with technicians found convenient for holding tools and equipment in place. Although Chia gives the spacecraft a passing grade, after the meeting, they gave him a crew portrait that had posed with head bowed and hand clasped in prayer with the inspiration. It isn't that we don't trust you, Joe, but this time we decided to go over your head. They joke, and they die. It isn't that we don't trust you, Joe, but this time we decide to go over your head in a few minutes. Only to joke. They die. Yes, you heard me right. They die. Chia gave him staff orders to tell North American to remove the flammables from the cabin, but did not supervise the issues personally. North American shipped spacecraft CM-012 to Kennedy Space Center on August 26, 1966 under a conditional certificate of flight worthless. 113 significant uncompleted plan engineering chains and to be completed as KSC. There was not at all. In addition, 623 engineering change orders were made and completed after delivery. Grissom became so frustrated with the inability of the training simulator engineers to keep up with the spacecraft change that he took a lemon from a tree by his house and hung it on the simulator. The command and service models were mated in KSC. It told the chamber in September and combined system testing were performed. Actual testing was performed first on crew, then with both the prime and backup crews from October 10 through December 13. During this testing, the environment control unit in the command module was found to have the design flaw and was sent back to the manufacturer for design change and rework. The return ECU then leaked water geisel coolant and had to be returned a second time. Also, during this time, a propellant tank in another service model has ruptured during the testing at NAA, prompting the removal from the KSC test chamber of the service module, so it could be testing for signs of the tank problem. These tests were negative. In December the 2nd, Block 1 Flight AS-205 was cancelled as unnecessary. Syria and Sicily and Cunningham was resigned as the backup crew of Apollo 1. McJet's crew was now promoted to prime crew of the Block 2. LM mission redesigned AS-258 became the AS-205 launch vehicle, would be used in place of AS-207. A third crewed mission was planned to launch the CSM and LM together on a Saturn V to an elliptical medium Earth orbit, to be crewed by Frank Borman, Michael Collins, and William Anders. McJeffs, Scott, and Shivarika has started their training for AS-258 in CM-101 at a NAA planet in Downey, California, when the Apollo 1 accident occurred. This picture is real. I'm not things, but this is real. McJeff, Scott, and Shivarika training for the second Apollo mission on January 26, 1967, in the first Block 2 command model, wearing early blue versions of the Block 2 parachute. Okay. Once all understanding CSM-012 hardware problems had been fixed, the resembled spacecraft complete a successful attitude chamber test with Jarira backup crews on December 30. According to the final report of the accident investigation board, at the post-test debriefing, the backup crew expressed their satisfaction with the condition and performance of the spacecraft. This would appear the contradict the account given in the 1994 book, Lost Moon, the previous voyage of Apollo 13 by Jerry Kluger. This guy, who is this? And astronaut James Lovell. That when the trio climbed out of the ship, Sharia made it clear that he was not pleased with what he had seen, and that he later warned Grissom and Shea that there's nothing wrong with this ship that I can point to, but it just makes me uncomfortable. Something about it just doesn't ring right, and that Grissom should get out at the first sign of trouble. Okay, there's a lot. I will stop at this thing, and the part 2 will go to the accident. Okay, after successful attitude test, the spacecraft was removed from the attitude chamber on January 3rd, 1967, and made it to its Saturn IB launch vehicle on Pad 34 here. On January 6, Grissom said in a February 1963 interview that NASA could not eliminate risk despite procreation. Only this. I will read only this. Okay, only this. And there's too many. An awful lot of people have devoted more efforts that I can describe to make Project Mercury its successors as safe as humanly possible. But we also recognize that there remains a great deal of risk, especially in autonomous operators regardless of planning. You just can't forecast all the things that could happen or when they could happen. I suppose that someday we are going to have a failure. In added other business, there are failures, and they are bound to happen sooner or later. He added Grimsom's was asked about the fear of potential catastrophe in the December 1966 interview. You sort of have to put that out of your mind. There's always a possibility that you can have a catastrophic failure. Of course, this can happen on any flight. It can happen on the last one as well as the first one. So you just plan as best you can to take care of all these eventualities, and you get well-trained crew and you go fly. Yup, this is so. Okay, I have a thing. I have a silly idea. I will copy all of this. I'm not joking. I'll copy all the yapping says. Go. Dun, dun, dun. I think it will take very long. Copy. Wait. I think it will be painful. Paste. Oh. Reload. Oh my god. I just can't be reached. We got a dinosaur. Bruh. Oh my god. There is nothing. Okay. There's a lot. So, wait. So, we have only 1, 2, 3. What? All of these? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. We only 1, 2, 3. Oh. So the next episode we going accident. So guys, if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, follow, and share more. Please! Don't forget to see part 2.